Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You have reached the No Name Cinema Society, the film review show that dares to dig just a little bit deeper. And this is episode 66.2, our Indie Spotlight. And as usual, we're looking back at indies from 5 years ago, indies from 2016 throughout this season. And tonight is the first English language film from Yorgos Lanthimos, The Lobster. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzler. I'm here at my home in Los Angeles. Very excited to be with you. And I've got a couple of excellent co-hosts with me tonight to talk about The Lobster. First, he has 45 days to find his soulmate or be turned into his favorite animal. Ladies and gentlemen, Devon Michaels is here.
That's every week.
I want to ask him what his favorite animal would be, but I just don't feel like I've got time. That's a whole other conversation. And also,
we'll do an opening remark,
ladies and gentlemen, a short-sighted loner who is starting to question his choice to give up romantic and sexual relationships. Patrick Taylor is here.
Short-sighted loner. Hi. Hello.
Do short-sighted loners say hello?
He does now.
I guess so.
He's breaking all the rules. All right. Speaking of rules, here is our schedule. It's the best segue I can do for this, our 66th series of episodes. And of course, is the Indie Spotlight. This upcoming Thursday is our classic movie discussion of Billy Wilder's The Apartment. And next Monday will be our 50th Sound Off, in which we're going to have a special announcement. Zach, Max, and I are going to do some recastings. And I'm going to count down my top 5 Shirley MacLaine films of all time. Speaking of all time, guys, who is drinking with me tonight? Anybody imbibing alcohol with me? I've got Goose Island. Patrick, you usually drink with me.
Yeah, I got a little Gentleman's Jack.
Gentleman's Jack. Nothing for you, Devon, right?
No, but if you want to talk about 5 Shirley MacLaine films, I'll have to.
Well, that's not tonight, but next time. But certainly, here, of course, is the drinking game slide that you guys, the fans, had a good time making up for us. Of course, as we go through the show, anytime I say all time, contrivance, contrived, or verisimilitude, you guys drink. Anytime Devon says there's something about, and anytime Patrick does not know the name of a film or an actor in the film, you guys drink. So be ready. In the meantime, Patrick, welcome to the show. Cheers to you, sir.
And I definitely don't know British actors, so this is like, I don't know who these people are.
It's gonna be a lot. And there's actors, Irish actors in this. There's like Greek actors in this movie. So we're all over the place with this particular movie, which leads me to trivia. The trivia that I said on the last Indie Spotlight was we're going to go back to our top 10 of 2016 to one of Jay Money's favorite films that I didn't like, and the same director would come back in 2017 with Davy's favorite film of that year, and then again in 2018 with a film that won an Oscar. That director, of course, is Yorgos Lanthimos. His film The Killing of a Sacred Deer was Davy's #1 film of 2017, and in 2018, of course, he came out with The Favorite, which took home the Best Actress Oscar for Olivia Colman, who appears in this film as well. The Favorite, incidentally, also made top 10 lists of both James and George in 2018. And of course, it co-starred our friend Emma, who's sitting behind me here this evening. All right, you guys ready for the summary? Get into it?
Summary. Get into it.
All right, we're going to kick things off, as we always do with a summary. The Lobster. David's wife leaves him for another man, which means David has to move to a hotel where he has 45 days to find a new mate or be turned into the animal of his choice. As part of his duties while living at the hotel, David has to participate in the nightly hunts of a revolutionary group called loners who live in the woods and have sworn off romantic relationships, rebelling from the system in place. All right, so as always with the Indie Spotlights, one of us has to recommend them. It's a little different from some of our other shows. Usually it's me that recommends it, but now that as a show we're 7 years old and we revisit indies from 5 years ago, we can now revisit films that made our various top 10 lists. Last time we did Christine, which was one of my favorite films from 2016. To be more well-rounded for the last 2 seasons, we're also including films that were on the top 10s on the others of the show, even though they're not on the show anymore. So technically it's Jay Money recommending tonight's film. It was his #2 film of 2016, and here's what he had to say about it on our top 10 of 2016 5 years ago.
My #2 is a movie that actually I watched last year, thinking that it would show up on our show last year, but
The
then
Lobster.
it was not good. It was not qualified for last year. Yes, #2 is The Lobster for me. This is a movie that I've had so many conversations with so many different people over the last year talking about this movie. I really enjoyed it. It has a very specific sense of humor that either you respond to or you don't.
Did you see on Twitter that The Lobster was the last? I watched The Lobster on Tuesday night.
Oh no, I didn't. Did you? Did you hate it?
I didn't hate it. I didn't like it, though.
I don't think it's a perfect movie in a lot of ways. I think it's a very unique movie, and that's probably why it ends up at the top of my list.
All right, guys, so this is actually one of the bigger or more well-known indies that we usually do some more obscure indies. But out of curiosity, has anybody seen or heard of this film before having to review it for tonight?
I heard of it quite a bit. I had never seen it.
He had never seen it before. Now it's interesting, you heard of it, but you hadn't seen it. It feels like a Devon movie and not so much a Patrick movie. So we'll see what they have to say with opening thoughts. And we heard a little bit what I had to say in that clip. But here's what these guys have to say, their opening thoughts. Devon is usually famously terrible at this, so we're going to start with Patrick. Sentence or less, what'd you think of the film?
Good setup, way too long to deliver nothing at all.
Okay, we'll dig into that. Devon, what did you think your first time out?
I thought this was a fascinating meditation on many themes that was often hilarious, but in the end, not emotionally satisfying.
Wow. I thought it'd be a Devon movie because it sounds very similar to my opening thought, which is, while I admit that it's very successful in what it wanted to be, I also have to admit that it had zero impact on me whatsoever. Dangerously similar to what Devon had to say, and which is scary to me because we disagree so often. So guys, in terms of where to start, we always like to start, or I always like to start anyway, with the thing that I think is most successful about the film. And I think this might be true about a lot of Yorgos Lanthimos films, is his style at least is distinctive for whatever story he's telling. His direction at least keeps things somewhat interesting. In this particular film, the shot selection struck me. Excellent framing and depth in images. An unusual mix of wide lenses and long lenses to add to the detached, emotionless feeling. Nothing really in between in terms of lens choice. I often liked how he framed out characters that were speaking so that we could focus on the main character listening, even if that main character wasn't offering us much. I liked the idea. And most importantly, the shots were very consistent with the tone that I'm about to talk about. Terrific, careful wide shots that offer a lot in the mise-en-scène. I wasn't always clear what various elements were trying to communicate, but everything seemed intentional. Random animals, for example, from camels to peacocks, often roam the frames to remind us of the alternative, the life not chosen, I suppose. All the details in the world building very specifically created a world that resembled our own, but was very different with its own unique set of rules, which were mostly communicated with only some occasional vagueness, but no obvious breaking of the rules of the world they were creating. So I was impressed from that point of view. You guys have anything on that, Patrick? The direction and shot selection, mise-en-scène?
I was watching this and I thought, this guy must love his DP. It was just so many beautiful shots that sometimes didn't drive the story. That person's doing a great job, but obviously overshot. Probably not expecting this person to use all of these shots in the edit.
You say that, but I actually feel like the movie, he didn't use a lot of coverage. It was a lot of wide shots, not a lot of singles, not a lot of two shots, only occasionally. Well, so when you say overshot, I think that gives the wrong impression. I think what you're referring to is that he lingered on some shots that he thought maybe were pretty.
When I said that was when they were in the mall and they're just doing the most mundane things, and he's holding on these close-ups. I didn't say that in the beginning. I love the very beginning. I love the wides. I love balance. There was just a point where it just became like egregious, and I'm like, okay, this guy can shoot. Let's go on with this story.
Yes. Okay. I see your point of view. And definitely there is a predominance of imagery and metaphor over narrative storytelling. And I think that's what you're hinting at potentially. Devon, what about you in terms of direction?
Yeah, I think it was very consistent, beautifully shot. The desaturation to really go hand in hand with the void of emotion, the void of meaning, was effective and bleak and sterile, but well executed.
Bleak is a word that Jay Money used in his clip. Consistent is a word that I'm about to use when I talk about the tone, and that you were sort of heading in that direction anyway, so that's a good segue. Though it was unique and unusual and confident and intentional, there's a carefully executed detachment that, while interesting, I ultimately found off-putting. It goes back to that opening statement where he's like, they accomplished what they wanted, but did they cut off their nose to spite their face? There's this very European detachment, but the result is I don't really care about the characters nor what happens to them. The detachment led to a lack of emotional investment for me, while the riddles of the film's metaphors got too oblique, so that ultimately it turned off my intellectual interest as well. It's that old tug of war, I think, between clarity and ambiguity. I also hate it when things are too obvious, but this perhaps went too far in the other direction to the point of alienation. And by that, I mean audience alienation. Devon, your opening thought was similar to mine. I wonder if you're on board with that concept.
Yes, I agree with what you were just saying. I think to really delve into that perspective is by looking at the script, because this script is so unapologetically going to 11 on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of avoiding all subtext. Every single character expresses their actual 100% thoughts 100% of the time. Which is a remarkable exercise.
And what you have to say about it is it's clearly intentional. Like it's a very specific choice. So you have to appreciate this is something that they were trying to do. And when they do reveal their own subtext, it's without any sort of intonations or emotions whatsoever. Again, also very intentional. And yeah, it's like an exercise. I just don't know how enjoyable it is to watch for me personally. Patrick, what about you on this tone?
I think we're right talking about the tone, because it comes a lot from the writing style, their short sentences, their cadence. I like this weird world, just like you're saying. I just didn't want to live there for this long.
I think that's an emotional investment point of view. And to be fair to Yorgos, he was involved in the script in this case. He was not in the favorite. It's one of those things that they're intricately tied together. I mean, they wrote the script, obviously, knowing the tone, but the execution of the tone in the script is a whole other thing. It's amazing that they actually managed to accomplish it to that level of detail.
It's a remarkable achievement. I absolutely laughed out loud easily a dozen times of a character just admitting absolutely everything going on in their mind in that moment, and yet not conveying anything either because of the
and I mean, I did not laugh, but I also wonder if you weren't laughing with it. You were more laughing at it to some degree because of how surprised you were by the lack of subtext.
I give it more credit than that. I think it was going for the humor.
And I mean, I think what we all agree on is it seems very clear that Lanthimos wanted to suck emotion out of the equation, presumably to make a point that we'll talk about later. I mean, even the suicidal character explains herself thoroughly in a very matter-of-fact way. In that sense, the performances were all in line with the concept, and as such, they're almost difficult to judge on their own. No one really shows any range. They're almost all playing one thing, and to Devon's point, without any subtext or nuance, but that's so on tone. These actors did exactly what they were asked to do, regardless of what you thought of the tone. The one exception might be Rachel Weisz, who has the film's most meaningful moments when she allows her face and body language to suggest something else going on underneath the cold exterior. I'm not sure Colin Farrell has any of those moments. Now, I generally have never felt that Colin Farrell brought much to the table as an actor historically, and while you could argue that's also the case here, one also gets the sense that is exactly the characterization that he and Lanthimos decided on. It seems intentionally dry and soulless, but to his credit, believably so, and likely exactly what he was asked to do. I didn't find it to be very evocative, but I can't say that it's a bad performance because it seems like what the director wanted and what everybody's doing. It's in this section because I feel like it's a part of the tone. I don't know how to judge the performances otherwise.
It was certainly a unique challenge for these actors, which I feel like they fulfilled. In the case of Farrell, it was admirable that he did keep me guessing for a good portion of the film. That was him and not so much there in the screenplay. This idea of, did he care? Did he want, was he really seeking something? Was he just doing this to avoid turning into an animal? Was he seeking something deeper?
For sure. I mean, a less confident actor, because I mean, like, why I think you were guessing is because he was giving us zilch. And to your point, I do think that takes some discipline at the very least. I think a lesser actor would be too insecure to give you so little. It's so contrary, I think, to the way you're taught. Patrick, performances, Farrell, Weisz, I can tell you who they played if you want.
I have a little cheat sheet.
Drinking audience is going to be so disappointed.
No, I do this every show now because of this damn game. But I did think they did their job. And I did think that it was funny. There was like at least 7 really funny moments that are laugh out loud comedy, but they happened in the first 55 minutes. It was like a whole cast of straight men. They all stayed in character. But it was almost like the director and the DP were just playing jokes on us the whole time. Like the whole time, I felt like it was like a rich person just playing games with my time.
You know, I will say it was very divisive when it came out because there are people that loved it, like J Money, and people that hated it. You guys have both been on shows with Ryan in the past. It was his #1 film of 2016. I do fall somewhere in the middle. It sounds like Devon does as well. Devon, you want to talk about the screenplay, so I'm going to start in on the screenplay. This is where my primary issues with the movie lay. Not so much the concept, but with the execution, structure, and characterizations. And again, I want to reiterate, all these things that I didn't enjoy serve the greater goal and the themes, but as a result, it seemed to sacrifice my interest and my engagement. In terms of execution, those of you fans that watch the show probably can guess what my #1 issue with the screenplay was, what I always tend to reject in screenplays. Anybody have any guesses here? The audience knows how much I hate voiceover. The writing itself of the voiceover was very literary and on tone, but it's also lazy in terms of exposition. And if you think about it, there's no way the character delivering the voiceover could really have all the information. In terms of structure, I think it's very odd in that it's almost 2 different movies that shifts almost exactly at the halfway point. There's no real arc. If characters do change at all, emotionally shift, I mean, it's pretty much done off camera or explained to us in the voiceover, which lessened the impact for me. And we talked a little bit about the characterizations already. They were intentionally flat. That's part of the point, I think, which I'll get to. And at the risk of sounding like a broken record, while I understand the reasoning for it, I did not enjoy it. I didn't care about them. I didn't care about their supposed love, which I didn't really get to see develop anyway. I didn't care about their predicaments, their fears, hopes, or desires, underplayed as they were. That's the downside of this unique approach, guys. I checked out.
I thought this was the voice of God until I realized that it was a character. I didn't realize how close this person was to the main person.
Actually, to me, it evoked Emma Thompson in Stranger Than Fiction.
I recognized Rachel Weisz's voice right away, so I didn't have that ambiguity.
No, to me, it was completely ambiguous, and I really was wondering why. It was strange. But I agree with you in terms of the structure, that being a little off. The ambitiousness of this exercise, as we called it earlier, almost called for keeping the entire story at the hotel. This could have been tighter film if they just made it 90 minutes all at the hotel, all over the course of those 45 days, or perhaps 46 days if you see what happens after the deadline. And instead, where it goes and this whole counterculture, and you know, it's interesting, and I understand what they're trying to do with that, or what they're trying to say, or the commentary politically, socially, culturally, but it made it sloppier as a story for me.
Also, I mean, like you're on a ride when you're in a movie. Like you're on a moving vehicle, as it were. This is a metaphor of my own to combat Yorgos' metaphors. So we're on this ride, and it's a weird right turn that is uncomfortable as a rider on this journey. I feel like the people that love it, J Money actually mentioned this in his clip, the uniqueness of it was interesting. So they liked it because it was different, but not necessarily because it was effective. But again, appreciation and props for accomplishing what you wanted. It's just, I'm questioning what you wanted. Patrick, do you have a rebuttal for Devon?
No, I'm agreeing with Devon. I really do think it could have been a way tighter package. And I did enjoy the setup, and I did enjoy where they were going. I thought it was a hotel movie. I didn't know that this was going to go into a revolutionary stance, and I didn't need it to because I enjoyed where they were. And it was jarring, like you're saying, that right turn.
The point of their metaphor needed them to, like the themes that they wanted to get across, is why they did it. As a story watcher, as a story experiencer, it was jarring. It's just the overall package didn't move me at all or interest me, but all the other details, like wearing the same clothes, for example, the lack of masturbation being allowed, makes sense in the scheme of what they're trying to accomplish. I appreciate that level of detail. It's almost sad that I felt so nothing towards the movie itself.
The payoff wasn't there. When they said they turned into the animal, I was like, oh my God, this world is crazy. All right, let me strap in. I was living in that world and I was enjoying it. I was just hoping that it would be a cute button or something would tie the story up, but it just kept unraveling like, oh, there's more for us to show you, but I didn't want any more. I liked where we were going.
Definitely the tone barely missed. It was good for a dozen really good laughs. It was good for sparking some discussion about our social imperatives.
We're going to get
from. I still think this was admirable. I do. I think it was an achievement.
I think we're all agreed on that. But what's weird is like almost all the time I've got ideas about things that maybe could have done differently. This one, I can tell you it's unsatisfying. You've got the idea of keeping it in the hotel. Maybe that would work. I haven't like put that through the shredder yet to see, but I don't really have a definitive constructive idea about how to make this better. Or if I was approaching this material, it would be very, very different, because I would be reluctant to suck all the emotion out in that way, because I would want my audience to care a little bit more. I don't want to say it's critic proof, but it's exactly what they wanted to be. So it's hard to like suggest that it's bad. I just didn't enjoy it.
It could have gone all the way to that dark, bleak, let's go all the way there, or it could have gone a little bit more, let's stick with the lighter satire. And it kind of went halfway in between. That's part of why it didn't have the impact, I think, emotionally that we wanted.
Agreed. And what you said gave me an idea. I think the difference might have been if Rachel Weisz and Colin Farrell, we actually got to see their relationship develop. You can suck all the emotion out of the beginning, and then that's the shift. When he meets her and she meets him, emotion starts to seep its way in, and then we've got a hook. We've got something to care about, something to root for. And I didn't have that here. You mentioned earlier, like making it more about the wilderness. I do think maybe that's the answer, in the sense that you can have this bleak, weird world in the hotel and make it, instead of an hour, make it 40 minutes tops. And then he's out in the wilderness and we get to explore their relationship without the voiceover, instead of her telling us, I fell in love with him because he's short-sighted. You know, it's, you know, we get to experience their relationship develop, even though they're not supposed to be fraternizing in that way. And I feel like that might have made the difference, because we would have seen the benefits of having an emotional attachment.
Absolutely, 100% agree. And then, you know, what you're talking about, I think, though, what you just described is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. You're talking about Kaufman. You're talking about, it's going all the way into that emotional place, dealing with it with that real, truthful tone. You're
not wrong. I didn't mean to rip it off, but it's my favorite movie from the 2000s, so I did it unintentionally. So, Patrick, we just rewritten and saved The Lobster.
Yes, good job.
So it sounds like, guys, that there is a lot of agreement on a lot of things that were said, which is interesting and good, because this film tends to be divisive. So let's move on now to Devon's favorite section. What is it, Devon?
The T word.
It's the T word. This is where we talk about themes. Davey used to hate talking about themes, so we danced around it, called the T word. A new section was born. So we're going to try and dig into the themes of The Lobster. And I'm going to start with the one that Patrick will think is obvious. He always gives me grief for doing the obvious ones, but I mean, like, it's got to be at least brought to the surface. I obviously interpret this film to be an exploration of modern love and relationships, but from a very macro point of view. And what I mean by that is it seems to examine societal expectations as far as romantic relationships are concerned. It unveils the real sense that you are considered something of a failure if you are not coupled off, as if that is a common goal for all humans everywhere. It is certainly a common expectation, and those of us that are unattractive and impossible to deal with, like I am, we are outcast and considered less than as a result of being largely undateable. The film acknowledges the need for human connection, but wonders why societal pressures seem to demand it come through a monogamous partner. I think the film also pokes a hole in the idea of requiring commonalities between you and your partner, as if people can't be attracted to one another unless they have a significant common ground. Paula Abdul, myself, and it seems Yorgos Lanthimos disagree with that concept. Guys, I've got modern love and relationships in the macro. Devon, I bet you're on board with that.
Your self-deprecation was up to 11, the way the dialogue in this film was up to 11.
Dude, I'm trying to match Yorgos, you know?
Yeah.
I'm revealing my subtext, Devon. Give me a break.
I do think that you're right. It's calling all of those questions out. To me, the choice in the end is such a bizarre, wrong-headed perspective. And that's part of why it was emotionally unsatisfying. It was sort of like this wrong-headed answer to one of the central thematic questions of the whole film, which you just mentioned about, do we need to have this thing in common? And that's what we should be seeking. That's fun along the way, and it was good for a few laughs. But then the fact that the film ended on a choice that was based on that, I don't know, it was just a bummer, and not like in a satisfying bummer way.
It's as if the message or his thoughts were more important than the audience's, which is fine, I guess. It's just, as an audience member, I can reject that. Patrick, what do you have to say about modern love and relationships?
I think it is about love.
That's what I should have done. Movies about love, blah, 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 and out. That's what
I mean, beating us over the head with the theme of how ridiculous domesticating yourself with one person is.
I think that the film acknowledges the need for human connection. I think it suggests it doesn't necessarily have to be this lifetime one-on-one couples thing for the rest of your life. That feels very limiting and a lot of pressure for those of us that are extremely ugly.
The themes end up getting a little bit muddy, even though they're obviously the top priority of a film like this. They end up not getting completely realized.
I just realized that the audio listening audience doesn't realize I just held up a sign that said bingo. Whenever I agree with Devon, he gets a bingo. I sometimes forget about the audio listeners instead of our YouTube people. All right, I'm going to move on to my other theme, which is sort of related, and I'm going to play the role of Devon here because I'm going to paraphrase one of his favorite sayings. There's something in this film about identity. And Devon sort of hinted at this, but didn't necessarily take it all the way there. This is maybe the sub-theme. Characters in the film seem to define themselves by a singular trait that they hope to match with someone else with a similar trait. As a matter of fact, most of the characters don't even have names in the script or in the credits. They are limping man, lisping man, short-sighted woman, biscuit woman, nosebleed woman. Those are the character names. And I think this suggests not how things are, but often how we are perceived by most of the outside world. For example, I truly think that 90% of the world sees me as classic movie guy, reducing me to the one thing they know about me without even attempting or being interested in digging deeper. And while, yes, classic movies are a part of who I am and what I know, just like lisping is for the John C. Reilly character, there's more to both of us. And so in its own unique way, I think the film makes the suggestion and perhaps even subtly hinting that maybe we need to make an effort to see more in people before we put them in boxes and pass judgment. Patrick, what do you think about this theme of identity?
It's a good theme. They use it as a joke for most of it. And so it's a good theme. But I mean, do I care about that? They didn't really dive into like what it means to be a person with a nosebleed or anything. I mean, it was just like kind of a way for them to have conversations.
I think it's something about world perception, how the outside world perceives us. And so I think that's one of the things that occurred to me. I mean, for them, it was also about the connection. That's sort of how it's related to the first theme. Their one defining characteristic was either attractive or unattractive to other people. And that's sort of how to define it. But the larger view of that is we are sort of pigeonholed into certain areas.
It spoke to this larger theme of how arbitrary so much of what we do is, specifically with how we decide to couple off in this society. For the most part, it all comes down to criteria that are kind of arbitrary. There's an interesting, bizarre, empty, existential angle on that. But I think it was especially compelling in those first 45 minutes, the way it hits that theme. Is the nosebleed thing any different from the fact that you happen to both like watching a certain type of movie, and that's how you end up coupling off with this person for 35 years of your life?
It's like that song Breakfast at Tiffany's from 1995 by Deep Blue Something. They're fighting and they're like, but hey, we both liked Breakfast at Tiffany's. Like, hey, I remember the film. It's before Patrick's time.
I think we both kind of liked it. That's one thing we got.
Exactly. I don't know why I suddenly thought of that song, but yes, that qualifies. And Devon, you get another bingo for that comment. Now, Patrick, now that you understand better perhaps what I meant by the theme, do you have a response?
No, I don't have a response. I don't like that theme either. I mean, the love theme is right. I mean, I get the identity theme. I get how absurd they're making it. If we're talking about what we think the more dominant theme is, it's the absurdity of being connected with somebody the rest of your life.
I was very clear that was the predominant theme. But you give me grief sometimes for doing the obvious themes. I wanted to have a less obvious one.
Can I give you a less obvious one?
Please.
The director doesn't care about your time. That's the most obvious theme.
I don't know about that per se, but I will agree in the sense that I don't think he cares about us at all, like our reactions. He's more concerned with the global society in general.
Kind of.
Outside of these questions of modern love and identity, I think it's sort of its own theme, the idea of communication, how we communicate, what we were talking about earlier in terms of the way the dialogue is written and having no subtext, expressing so much and yet expressing so little at the same time, and how human beings are absurdly capable of doing those opposites at the same time, and the tragedy of that.
You're right. I should have thought of that. But there is value in the themes, I guess it's just not the most fun vehicle to be on. I guess it's worth watching. It's definitely not worth rewatching. Next indie, we're going to continue with classic indies, and the next indie will take us back to my top 10 list from that year. This one getting an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. Next up, however, in just a few days, will be our classic movie discussion, a film that has come up in my top 5 Billy Wilder films of all time. The Best Picture winner from 1960, The Apartment, is our next film for discussion coming up in just a few days. With that said, say goodbye to the audience.
Goodbye, audience.
We do care about you.
That's right, we do. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting of the No Name Cinema Society is adjourned.